Good morning. It is so good to be back with you again, and it is so good to know that the God that I worship here in America is the same God that you're worshiping right now in Valour. I think that what we will do is we'll start with singing two songs, and they are songs that your parents don't know. The first one is Asante Sana Yesu. We've sung this a number of times. Asante Sana means thank you very much. Yesu, of course, means Jesus. And we sing Asante Sana 3 times. And then on the third time, we say Moyoni, which is in my heart. So thank you, Jesus, in my heart. And then we sing it another time. So hopefully you will sing it with me and you can teach your parents. So, Asante Sana Yesu, Asante Sana Yesu, Asante Sana Yesu Moyoni, Asante Sana Yesu, Asante Sana Yesu, Asante Sana Yesu Moyoni. Very good. And the second one, I know I taught to a few of you, and it's called Deep and Wide, and it talks about the fact that God's love for us is deep and wide and high and more than we can even understand. And what we do is we sing the song first, deep and wide, deep and wide. There's a fountain flowing deep and wide, deep and wide, deep and wide. There's a fountain flowing deep and wide. And that fountain is God's love. Now, we sing it the first time. The second time, we're not going to say deep. We're just going to go and wide, and wide. Okay? And then the next time we sing it, we're going to leave out the wide. So it's going to be and 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 then the last time we sing it, we're not going to say deep, wide, or fountain. Okay, are you ready? Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Deep and wide, there's a fountain flowing deep and wide. Okay, this time we're going to leave out the word deep. And wide, there's a fountain flowing and wide. And wide, there's a fountain flowing and wide. This time we're going to leave out wide and deep. Ready? And there's a fountain flowing and there's a fountain flowing and This time we also leave out fountain. So deep, wide, fountain. Ready? And remember, we're talking about God's love here is like a fountain that is so deep and so wide we can't even understand it. And there's a flowing and there's a flowing and Very good. Before we get started with our lesson today, let's just pray together. Pray with me, please. Dear Jesus, we thank you so much that we can be together, that we worship the same God here in America as the children are worshiping in Valour. And I pray that you would open up our eyes, open up our ears, open up our hearts to listen to what you have for us today. In thy name, amen. So today, I want to talk about a verse in the Bible, And it just seems like this is a really difficult time for us. With the coronavirus, it meant that Ken and I had to leave you and come here to the U.S. We're also on lockdown. You're on lockdown. It just seems like there's a lot of worry, a lot of fear, a lot of bad things that have come as a result of being locked down. So the Bible verse today is from the book of Romans, Romans 8:28. And it says, "And we know that all that happens to us is working for our good if we love God and we are fitting into His plans." That means that no matter what happens to us, whether we get sick, whether we're locked down, no matter what, God will work all of those things together for our good. We might not understand what God is doing, but we can believe His promise that what He is doing inside us, what He is allowing to come into our lives, will be for our good. Now, I did some baking this afternoon. I baked a pumpkin cake, and I haven't tried it yet, but it smells wonderful, and I think it probably will taste really good. Now, in order for me to make that cake, I had to take lots of different ingredients. I took flour. Now, do you think that I could just sit and eat the flour? No, because flour by itself is not good. I think it might even make you sick if you ate flour by itself. So, not good by itself, but it makes a nice cake. I have some salt here. Salt is good on vegetables. Salt is good on food, but salt is not good if we are to have a lot of it. In fact, if you were to take a lot of salt, it would actually damage your stomach. So, not good by itself. Then I had baking soda. And for the bakers out there, if you've ever tried baking soda, it tastes terrible. It does not taste good, but it makes our cake rise so that the cake will taste good. But by itself, not good. I had baking powder. To tell you the truth, I've never tasted baking powder, but I certainly wouldn't have a spoonful of it. It looks a lot like the flour does. It's also necessary to make our cake rise. And then I've got some spices. I've got cinnamon, and I've got nutmeg, and I've got cloves. All of these are spices that if you were to take a spoonful of them, they would be too much. It would not taste good. But when you put a little bit in a cake, And then the last thing is I put 4 eggs in there. Now, if you know about eggs, I can't imagine anybody would want to eat a raw egg. In fact, they tell us that we shouldn't eat raw eggs because it can make us sick. So all of these ingredients by themselves, if you were to take each one by themselves, would not be good. But when you mix them all together, then you have a cake that is good. So it reminded me, thinking about our Bible verse, and we know that all that happens to us is working for our good if we love God and are fitting into His plans. It reminded me of a Bible character in the Old Testament who had some good things happen in his life, but he had a lot of really difficult, bad things. And we're going to see how his life turned out. We're talking about Joseph, and Joseph had 11 brothers, and his dad loved Joseph the most. And his dad gave Joseph a coat that was made out of many different colors. And I have put bad here because when Jacob gave Joseph the coat, his brothers got very jealous and they hated Joseph. Well, one day, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are out with the sheep. Will you go and just check and see how they're doing?" And so Joseph said, "Sure." So he went and he found his brothers. And when his brothers saw him coming, they said, "This is our chance to kill him. We don't like him." And so when Joseph got there, they were going to kill him, and they decided instead that they were going to throw him down in a well. So his brothers picked him up and threw him down inside of the well, and they were planning on killing him. Well, as they were deciding how they were going to do this, they noticed that a caravan of Ishmaelites were coming, and the Ishmaelites were interested in buying Joseph because they would take him to Egypt and sell him as a slave. And the brothers thought, this is a good idea. We can make some money. We can get rid of Joseph so we don't ever have to deal with him again. And so Joseph's brothers sold him to the Ishmaelites, and the Ishmaelites took him to Egypt. Well, in Egypt, the Ishmaelites sold him as a slave just like they had promised. And the man that bought him was an official in Pharaoh's court. Pharaoh was the king of Egypt. And so Potiphar bought Joseph as a slave. And I put that it was bad because Joseph was sold as a slave. It was also good because Potiphar was a good, kind master. Well, Joseph was in Potiphar's home, and he was so good, that such a good servant, such a good slave, that Potiphar put him in charge of his whole household. Everything that went on in Potiphar's household, Joseph was in charge of. This was very good. Joseph was given a lot of responsibility. He was treated very well. Unfortunately, Potiphar's wife was not as good as her husband was. And she came to Joseph when no one was in the house. And she tried to get Joseph to sin. And Joseph said, "How can I do that? My master is trusting me." And he got away from Potiphar's wife, but she grabbed his coat. And when Potiphar came home that night, she lied to Potiphar and said, "See what this slave has done? He tried to take me and tried to commit sin, and I grabbed his coat and he got away." Well, unfortunately, Potiphar believed his evil wife, who was telling the lie, did not believe Joseph. And so Potiphar, this was bad, Potiphar threw Joseph in prison, which of course was bad. Now, when he was in prison, there were two other men that were put into prison at the same time, and they worked for Pharaoh. One was the wine bearer, and his job was to taste the wine for Pharaoh to make sure that it wasn't poisoned. And the other man was the baker. And when they were in prison, they had a dream. Both of them had dreams. And the dreams were quite disturbing. And so when Joseph heard about the dreams, he said, "God has given me the ability to understand dreams. If you tell me your dream, maybe God will tell me what it means." And so they did. The dream that the baker had was not very good. The dream meant that he was going to be killed. The dream that the wine bearer had was good. It meant that the Pharaoh was going to forgive him, get him out of prison, and give him his job back. And so Joseph said, when Pharaoh does that, please tell him about me. Please tell him so that he can get me out of prison, because I'm here because Potiphar's wife lied. Well, it happened just like Joseph had said. The baker was killed. The winemaker was given back his job. But the winemaker forgot all about Joseph, and so Joseph continued to sit in prison. Well, then the winemaker heard that Pharaoh had had a dream, and none of Pharaoh's magicians, none of his men could tell him what the dream meant. And then the wine bearer remembered about Joseph and about how God could use Joseph to tell dreams. So the wine bearer went to Pharaoh and said, I think I know someone that can tell you what your dream means. And sure enough, they brought up Joseph, and Joseph told him what the meaning of his dream was. And the dreams, he dreamt that there were 7 fat cows that came out of the Nile River. And then there were 7 skinny, scrawny cows that came out of the river and ate up the fat cows. And then he dreamt that there were 7 beautiful grains of wheat that were growing nicely, and 7 scrawny, straggly, dried up grains of wheat came and ate the good grains of wheat up. And Pharaoh didn't know what that meant. Well, Joseph was able to tell him. God gave him the meaning of the dream. And what it meant was that Egypt was going to have 7 good years. 7 years when their crops would grow. 7 years when everybody would have plenty of food and leftover food. And so Joseph said, what you need to do, and then after that, there's going to be 7 years of famine when there's going to be drought and nobody's going to have food. And Joseph said, what you need to do is put somebody in charge and save all the excess food for 7 years so that when drought and famine comes, then people will have enough to eat. Well, Pharaoh was so happy to have his dream interpreted that he gave his ring to Joseph, and he put Joseph in charge of the whole kingdom in Egypt. Everything except he was one lower than the Pharaoh was. And so Joseph was in charge of collecting all the extra food and storing it so that when the bad years came, there would be enough food. That was good. Meanwhile, back in Canaan, where his dad and his brothers were, there was a famine and a drought, and they had no food. And so Jacob, Joseph's dad, said to his other sons, you need to go to Egypt. I hear that there's plenty of food in Egypt. See if you can buy some food and bring it back here so that we don't die of starvation. Now, Jacob didn't know that Joseph was in Egypt. The brothers thought that Joseph was a slave. They had no way of knowing that Joseph was second in command in Egypt. So the brothers went, and eventually Joseph told them who he was, and they couldn't believe it because they thought Joseph was probably dead. And so Joseph forgave his brothers for the bad things that they had done. That was a good thing. And it was also a good thing because Joseph, being second in command in Egypt, was able to say to his brothers, go back, bring your wives, bring your children, bring dad, bring all of God's people back to Egypt. I can give you land for your cattle, for your sheep, You can live here, you will have plenty of food, and you won't die. And this ended up being really, really good because it saved God's people. If Joseph hadn't been there and hadn't offered for them to come to Egypt, God's people would not have survived. And so it ended up being good. We think back about our Bible verse, and again, we know that all that happens to us is working for good. So we had Joseph, all these bad things happened. He was thrown into the pit. He was sold in slavery. He ended up in prison because Potiphar's wife lied. And God took all of those things in his life. And what happened was, because those things had happened, because Joseph ended up in Egypt, then God's people were saved. So, as we think about the way our life is right now, with the lockdown, with coronavirus, I started thinking about some of the things that you might be facing. Some of them might be good, but right now probably a lot of things are not real good. Coronavirus. We're going to put it in my mixing bowl. Oh, birthdays. Birthdays are good. Put that in there too, but oh, can't have a birthday party, can we? No birthday party. No sports. Maybe your holiday trip was canceled. No school. I don't know if you think that's a good thing or a bad thing. Oh, but there's Domino's Pizza. That's a good thing. Put that in our mixing bowl. Oh, Amazon isn't delivering. So if you want to buy a book or Legos or a toy, you can't get it. Maybe your grandmother dies. That's a bad thing. Maybe you found out you got poor grades on your exam. Not a good thing. Maybe somebody is bullying you. Your grandparents can't visit you because they're under lockdown. And then there's the lockdown. Can't go shopping. So we take all of those things, some good things and some bad things, and we mix it all up. And remember, God has told us that everything that happens to us is going to be for our good. So let's see what we have here. Oh, let's see here. So we've taken the bad things, we've taken the good things, and again, our Bible verse says, and we know that all that happens to us, even the bad things, even coronavirus, everything that happens to us is working for our good if we love God and are fitting into his plans, and that's from the book of Romans. It's a promise. We might not know why God is doing what he's doing. We might not know why there's coronavirus. We might not know why he's allowing coronavirus to come or for us to be locked down, but we do know that he is allowing these things to happen to us for a reason, and we can trust that God loves us and God is doing the very best thing for us. So remember that we can have bad things that happen in our life, but that God only wants the best for us.